So hello everyone. Just tell me in the chat if there's anything, if the sound is okay, I guess. And today's game is a famous game in Go history. It's a game that supposedly went on to become a triple ko, and it was considered to be a bad omen because this was played on a kind of a special day. So let's see. Let's just go through the opening a little bit. So in the this was played in 1582, so the 16th century, and they generally played 3-4 points at that time. So it was looking at the history of Go. They started by playing a fixed opening in ancient China, and they played star points on two corners each, and then started the game. And then after they got rid of that rule, sometime after Go came to Japan, they started playing 3-4 points. So 3-4 points are normal. And there was no komi. So white is playing very actively here. And so that's what we're seeing with this immediate approach move here. And white approaches all of these corners. And black plays this pincer in the center. So the biggest contrast with modern games is moves like this, where black is playing relatively calmly and pacifically, while white is playing very actively, and it's because there's no komi. Okay, that's great. So yes, then McKinnon is caught on to the idea that it was sawn by Nobunaga. So this was a special time in Japanese history as a country, because after about 100 years of a feudal era where there was warfare almost nonstop, there was this general called Oda Nobunaga who had unified the country. And, well, he was well on the way to unifying the country anyway. And he had defeated most of his main rivals, and he was in control of Kyoto, which was the cultural center of Japan. And at the time of this game, he was in the Honno-ji, which is the Ji part means it's temple, so it was the Honno temple, and this was sort of his headquarters when he was in his home ground in Japan. And he was having this big party where people were coming to meet him and show their loyalty. And he was showing off various artifacts that he had, like his lacquerware, I think it was, stuff like that. And a part of this was, and this is not a part of, the party itself is actually recorded in Japanese history. So they know that he did have this big party to gather his followers up. And what is not recorded in the formal Japanese history, but is a part of Go history, is that they say that there were some demonstration Go games played at this party. And the players, of course, were Honinbo Sansa, and Hayashi Rigen. So to talk about the players, Honinbo Sansa was the strongest player of his time, and so he's called the Meijin, although they had not the ranks that they used later in the Edo era were not formalized at that time, I don't believe. But he's called a Meijin, and that makes him equivalent to a 9-dan in the modern system. So that's why you might see I've put him down as a 9-dan professional. And his opponent, all we know for 100% sure is that his opponent is called Rigen. I'm pretty sure about that. And so if he's the Rigen that became Hayashi Rigen, and this person also was a Buddhist monk. I think mostly it was Buddhist monks at that age who were sort of the intellectuals. They did they were the learned people, the scholars. And so he was a monk at the Honno-tera, at the Honno-ji, or the temple. So that's where he lived. And Honinbo was a monk in a different temple. So they were both supposedly religious people, and they were playing this game. And the story is that it turned into a triple ko. And since Oda Nobunaga was killed, or he committed suicide that night, he was betrayed, and they decided that was an evil old man. But we'll see that in the game coming. Back to the game. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, that's a great question from Leonardo. How strong of a Go player was Oda Nobunaga? Well, actually, Oda Nobunaga played Go, and he played it with some of his generals because they had this idea that to have good judgment in warfare, you had to have good positional judgment in the game of Go. So it was sort of, some of the generals linked that very strongly, and so they looked for people who were good at Go. And so one of his strategic generals was actually a very good Go player. And Oda Nobunaga, sorry about that. Oda Nobunaga was said to be a strong amateur. He would be a strong amateur nowadays. Maybe about, what I have heard, he was probably about 4 stones to a professional player. So that makes him a pretty good amateur. And actually, his successor, after he was killed, eventually his Toyotomi Hideyoshi became the leader of Japan. And he was about the same strength, maybe a bit weaker. And also the final unifier of Japan was Tokugawa Ieyasu. He started the 300 era of peace in Japan. So it was kind of a Tokugawa, Pax Tokugawa peace in Japan, which lasted about 300 years. He was maybe the strongest Go player and a very avid Go player. So all of these 3 men who were leaders of the country were actually very strong amateur Go players. Oh, and actually, there's a Go set that is said to have been used in a game between Tokugawa Ieyasu and Toyotomi Hideyoshi. So they're the other two leaders. So white plays this pincer. And of course, you might know that in modern days, a computer program will suggest almost always to press, probably maybe this point actually, to press on the 5th line here. White could have played any of these pressing moves on the 5th line. But this is a move that was very popular at the time. And at the time of this game, I don't believe they really had any josekis to deal with this that really lasted into modern days. So attaching here continued to be very popular in the Edo era. But also attaching here was played. And so all of these are moves that can be played. And extending here is the move that was... This is probably the joseki that we see most in the following century, you might say. Maybe into the late Edo era. So this joseki probably was a popular joseki for probably about 200 or 300 years. And it still can be played nowadays. It's considered better to extend here. And white will push into the corner. And after black bumps here, if we look at the local shape, the corner, the 3-3 point in the corner, and an extension towards the side or miya. So if we just ignore the whole board position, and because actually the lower right corner is probably more important than anything in the upper right corner. But if we just look at the upper right corner in itself, then covering here and extending somewhere around here. Or if white plays on this side, black can cover here. And this was, this joseki was actually played up into the 20th century. I don't think I've seen it much in the last 2 decades, but I did see it in 20th century games by top professional players. So it was a very long-lasting joseki. I don't think they quite had it at the time of this game, but after they started having Go schools, they very quickly started playing this joseki. So it's been around for probably 400 years. Okay. So in the game black covers here, no one liked this move. It was considered a mistake by black to allow white to play an Atari on top. And to most players, I would say it's a bad idea to do this because you do get sort of cramped in the corner. But I was interested to see that the computer analysis did not give it a huge drop in score. So maybe it's not as bad as we thought it was. And white connects here. So already we have a shape that looks like it could be turning into the carpenter's square. Okay. So yeah. Right. Yes. I think they just thought that the kind of the mindset that was good at playing Go would be good at making strategy for war-like situations. So yeah, to go back to the idea that generals in this era did like to study Go, and they had a lot of strong players, fairly strong players, who were sort of hired to be generals just because of that. So when I'm talking about the upper right corner looking like the carpenter's square, I'm talking about if white plays here and white plays here, and we get into this shape. This is what we call the carpenter's square. This shape of the black stones is called the carpenter's square. It's just the square shape. And this is a shape that is going to be a ko. And white has a number of ways of doing it. But the one way you probably need to know is if white plays here, black can handle it by playing an attachment on the 2-1 point. And it's going to be a ko whatever happens. I'll talk about this a little bit more later. So people who really hate this kind of stuff can finish at the end of the game and they can leave early. But so I won't do this early in the game. People who are interested can think about it for a bit. And maybe you would wonder how this is going to turn out. It does make a difference whether these outside liberties are open or filled. And in this position, actually, white's outside shape is a bit flimsy. White wouldn't be able to do very much in the corner immediately. It's sort of dangerous for white to try this yet. So we're going to assume that white is reinforced somehow on the outside. Okay, so back to this. So black actually played here. And this is a strong attack which actually makes the whole sequence here in the upper right corner. Although black did get an empty triangle shape there, this attachment makes it work. So if white pushes through here and tries to save everything, this is going to be a bit of a problem for white because the black group in the corner is not easy to kill, and it's pretty much alive. And white has a lot of issues on the outside. So this is just it's not working for white. So white plays a honey on the outside, black pushes through. Now after this, interestingly enough, now there's some potential that it's going to work for white. So it depends on the ladder. So if white pushes through here, black can play like this. For the time being, the ladder when white plays here, I bet this ladder is good for black. This ladder is good for black. So it's not working for white yet. And so what white would do, for instance, white could, after playing this exchange, white could have played here. So this is a move that, for instance, neural network computer programs like this move anyway. So if black rolls here and plays here, now the ladder is going to be good for white. I'm just checking here. The ladder is good for white. So that means that when black plays like this, black cannot play here. Now black's going to lose by the ladder. Black has to curl around once. So the idea with this move would be to, if white extends, black can play here. And even though white gets a squeeze here, it's probably not going to be very good. So this kind of stuff could happen. The squeeze doesn't really work. So black can actually break through here. So just, I'll leave it there. There are some variations to that one, but I'll leave it as it is. So what white's going to do is when black curls around here, black does get to capture that one stone, but in this variation, black's group in the corner, white might actually curl around once to kill it. So the group in the corner is not alive. So white has a move at R18. White has this move here, which it sort of depends. It's going to be a core. Sometimes white can kill it. Right. Well, thank you, Dansu, but right. Yes. So this is would be white's plan. It depends on the ladder. And there is a follow-up attack in the corner, which makes this worth doing for white. But white didn't go that way. White played here, an extension on the upper side. That's a big move. Black would be pincering there next. And we have to remember that in this game with no komi, most of the time black has a lead. So black's still way ahead. But this move, again, it's an old-fashioned, what they would call an old-fashioned move. So people, like hundreds of years after that, hundreds of years ago now, but somewhere in between that era and now, did make comments on this game, and we're calling this the old-fashioned move. So people about 200 years ago were calling it old-fashioned. Modern games, black could play a diagonal move here, for instance. Or in super modern, I think maybe black would be kicking here. And if white extends, black would jump here. So black could have done that too. This would have probably been the, maybe call it the ultra-modern way. After we had computer programs, I think we would be playing this way. So he plays this, and it's actually working in a certain way. It's as far as the shape of the moves, with black playing the attachment here and extending, and then covering on the 3-3 point. Although I call it old-fashioned, and it's not common in this particular position. If we change some of the local stones, then it's something that can happen. So as far as the shape of the stones, the shape of the moves they're playing, there's nothing so weird about it. It's nothing strange. And extending here, that's a legitimate, I like that move too. It's protecting the potential cut here. So, for instance, the cut here could potentially be a problem. So it's protecting against that. And it's also getting a base for the black group. So if black had played something like this, then white would still have the opportunity to play here and start pushing black around there. So it's a big move. It's an opening point. At the same time as reinforcing that black group, it's taking an opening point. And white finally takes the fourth corner. And black plays here. Now this is a move that was played a lot a few hundred years ago. And then in modern days, in the early 20th century, people stopped playing it. And they thought it was not active enough. And people preferred to play something closer to the corner, like moves like this. And they called the large knight's move approach old-fashioned. It's interesting how these things go back and forth in Go, because after that, when Go Seigen, the great, he was from China, he was a genius of the 20th century. He said he created something called the new opening. Well, he created the new opening. That he did that in the 20th century. And then later on in his later years, he started doing something he called the 21st century opening. And it used this large knight's move approach a lot. So this is one of his favorite moves. And so a lot of people were playing it in the last few decades, actually. But usually this is combined with some kind of an extension to the right side. So, for instance, like this. This would be a normal move. If black wanted to put a bit more pressure on the white group in the upper right, so black could get closer to that. I think I saw Katago suggesting this move. 3-space extension on the third line. It's sort of scary, but when white plays here, the idea is to surround these guys and make some territory there. So that's the idea behind this three-space extension. It's just putting that much more pressure on these two white stones. So that's how it's working. Otherwise, a kind of a normal looking move would be to play a high 3-space extension. I don't really like this in this position because it's weak to the invasion. So that's probably why it's not the best move. But actually black extends here. And this is kind of old style, and you see it a lot in professional games until Dosaku came along. So that was about almost 100 years after that, several decades after that, at least. Dosaku was just really great at putting his opponent into an over-concentrated shape. So this is an example of black being slightly over-concentrated here when black rolls and is spending a lot of stones to get a low position on the bottom side there. It's a bit low and a bit too many stones to be using for that much territory. So people would call it over-concentrated. And this kind of sequence for white is something that Dosaku, Honinbo Dosaku, was one of his specialties. Something he liked to do, and he did it very well. And since everyone got clobbered by him using this kind of stuff, they stopped playing these low moves on the third line. So going back to what I think black should have done, maybe with this move, extending here, of course. If black were going to play on the lower side, nowadays black would be thinking of a move like this, or kicking. It would be one of those two, and putting more pressure on that white stone on the left. High extensions. How are high extensions best handled? That's a difficult. It depends on so much context. It's sort of hard to answer. It's usually a good idea to. The reason I showed this move is that let's see, where did I show it? This move. The reason I showed this move is that quite often it's a good idea to be making territory with one of your stones on the third line and one of your stones on the fourth line. So for instance, if we did that on the lower side, it could be a shape like this, where black has a stone at 1 on the fourth line and a stone at 3 on the third line. And also you might notice that if we look at it from the viewpoint of the lower side, that stone in the corner at D3, this stone here also is on the third line. So this combination of stones on the third line, which are blocking the side, so they're blocking the opponent from coming in from the side, and the stone on the fourth line, which gives some, you might say, height, or getting into the center of the board a little bit. That combination is what we consider to be the best way to surround territory. So people look for moves from the third line to the fourth line. And so the weakness of a stone on the fourth line is that it is wide open to an attack from the third line. So when white plays here, there's a hole underneath there on the second line where white can be sliding into black's territory underneath here. And so there's a tendency for a stone on the fourth line to be weak to an attack from the third line. And when you play moves on the third line and the fourth line like this, they cover the weaknesses of each other. So they work well together. So that's why you sort of naturally are looking for a move from the third line to the fourth line, so like this. And it's why this move sort of looks unusual, but in this particular board position, it is working. Okay, so white presses here. In a modern game, and actually even at this time, they like to play this extension, then push through and cut. So black could have done that. This would have led to a wild fight. So like this, and this is white at this point. After this cut here and the extension here, it's a pretty straightforward sequence. Usually this is going to happen. And after this, white has a choice of sliding into the corner from this side, in which case black would be sliding out this way, or playing from this side and forcing black to live in the corner. So maybe in this case, this is going to work better. Black does have enough room to live, but white has a forcing move here. So white always has that stone there, which is going to be forcing. For instance, if black tries to cut white here, okay, now that's going to be a different thing. I might have messed up. Yeah, this is I might have messed up here. So let's say let's have white play that first, just to be on the safe side. Yeah. So white can play here. It's going to be forcing. Maybe white's going to do it in this order. Another carpenter's square, by the way. We'll talk about carpenter's square towards the end of the video. Okay, so black could have pushed through and cut, but you can see it's going to be this huge fight that's going to spread from... It's going to spread like a cancer from the lower left corner and cover the whole board. Just spread out. So black plays relatively peaceful. And at this point, I'd say that with no komi, black probably still has a slight advantage. But white has caught up a little bit, so it's not as if black's winning by 7 points. C8 is a big point. That's standard trickiness is... that's a good point. So, so white could even play it right now. This is a big point for white. It's a big point for black to play a 2-space extension there. But the right side is really important too. So I'd say the right side is more important. And I think white should probably play here. But in the game, white got fancy a bit and played here. Actually made this exchange first and then played here. So this worked really well for white. And the way it's working, that diagonal move here, the exchange there turned out to be a huge advantage, Kikashi, and a great exchange for white. Because, for instance, if black plays something like this, white can capture these stones. And so without that, white would be playing something a bit less aggressive. But white can capture the stones. So black still has various ways to try to attack this white group, but that exchange there is just making white very much stronger than white was before. So it's making it difficult for black to succeed here. And so that was great. Actually, black should have taken the opportunity to capture this stone in the center. You might remember I told you that there's a ladder involved here if white plays here, and black cannot cover on the second line because white will capture the ladder. And so there's always this issue of white doing that. Black might actually just extend the corner and sacrifice those stones in the center for the time being. But this is something that white can do at any point. So it's worthwhile for black to be handling that by cutting here. Getting a thick position in the center. White has to extend on the side anyway. And then black can get to the left side. So getting to the left side is pretty important here. And in this case, black's position in the upper right corner, black has an eye here. Oh yeah, I should redo that. So black has an eye here. The corner is open a little bit, but black's out in the center. So this is a pretty solid shape. And black is looking to peep here at some point, which could be annoying. And so this would have been good for black. Black would have still had a lead. In the game, black answered that. I think that was a bit weak. And then extended here. You can see again, at this time in history, people really just loved the third line. So this is a move that we would not play today. And black should have played on the left side. So peeping here maybe. I showed you why this one didn't work. So peeping here and extending. In this case, there's no loss in peeping at 1. People call it a vulgar move, which means that maybe it loses potential. In this case, it's probably worthwhile to play just to do that much to reinforce the black group. If white plays like this, this would reinforce the white group. So this is reinforcing the wall and making some space here. And black would answer by playing here. This would finish making a living shape here. So this would be alive, and black would be putting a little bit of pressure on these stones. So it would be working well for black. Otherwise, if white didn't do 4 and 6, now if white doesn't do that, the reason white did that was to stop black from peeping here. So peeping here is a move that can be sort of annoying for white, and that white will, since it doesn't have eyes, it's going to end up playing a lot of dame points from here on. So that's why white sort of wanted to play this exchange, just to reinforce the wall and make it a useful thing. Something you have to be careful when you have a wall that doesn't have eyes yet. You have to take care of it in that case. If you can make use of it to control a large area, then it works as a wall, as thickness, you might say, as a strength. Okay. Yeah, I guess people are happy enough with my commentary. The chat seems to be a bit quiet, so I'll just go ahead. So now white gets the extension. So this was a key point, and black peeped here. Okay. Um, Actually, there's a mistake in the game record. I should have caught that earlier, but there was a mistake in this game record. White actually pushed through here first and then connected. So it's important to push through first to establish that black is not going to sacrifice these two stones before white connects at 3. So this was the actual record that I remember from actually playing it out. This record that I downloaded on the internet, it had some mistakes in it. So one of them was that white actually played this before connecting at the mark point. So yeah, I can't change it right now, so we'll leave it. So by pushing through there at D16, white did establish that white can play all these forcing moves. And the way white used that was white just played this forcing move from the corner, and then later on, white's going to have these forcing moves from the center. So the idea is that white is just playing a lot of forcing moves against black in this local position. Click Decision says, how do I stave off the despair and losing over and over? When people play, half of them are going to lose. You just have to figure out what was the bad move. And if you get rid of one bad move every time you play, you're gonna win pretty soon. Yes, decide you're not going to make the same mistake twice. One interesting variation actually is that when black played here, okay, standard trickness. How to feel about C8? C8, yes. Yes, it pincers. Okay, that's an interesting thing that standard trickiness is saying. It pincers the black stone, so that's what standard trickiness likes about this pincer that white played at C8. So it pincers black, but also it doesn't seem to be making full use of all these stones lined up in a wall. But I sort of hinted at this earlier. Even when you have this huge wall of stones, if you don't make anything out of it, it can become an eyeless wall and become something that the opponent can attack. So it's probably the important thing is to make use of it this way. And white is going to use the following attack to make some strength towards the center of the board. So it's sort of a part of the process, you might say. Yes. So this base, yes, as Leonardo is saying, it usually looks safe, but because white has walls on both sides, it's not. And it's going to live, but it's going to be a bit painful. So this was actually, let's just go back a bit and talk about that. So that's where we're here, yeah. So another way for black to do that, this might have been better to play a diagonal move here. And this is not alive either. So for instance, if we look just at the left side, white can actually scoop out black's eye shape by playing here and here. But the point is, the weak group for white is this one. So instead of immediately trying to make eyes, black is first trying to put some pressure on the white group. So this would be, black would continue, for instance, even if black plays something like this, it turns out that the strong one is the black group and the white group is not so strong. So one thing is that white doesn't really have time to do any stuff on the second line. The other thing is that it's more important to be getting out into the center and having a position where the strength of this white group and this black group, the strength of the two groups, it seems to be about equal. And so this is something that I would suggest black should have done. In the game, okay, we get all these forcing moves. Let's just go ahead with the game variation. And white plays here. So this is an exquisite attack that white is starting to do here. And actually, this sort of links in with the question about how white's wall works, because white is pushing black towards the wall. And again, this move at d12, I like this move also. And by creating a strong position there, and the fact that black, even if black starts moving towards the wall, black doesn't really have any good future in that direction. There's nothing good happening for black in this area, which is dominated by white's wall. So white actually ends up pushing black towards white's strength, which is according to theory. And also, it's notable that now white has a kind of a base here, which is already close to being 2 eyes. So it's not 100% alive, but it's starting to be alive. It means that any fighting that happens in this area is going to be easy for white. Just going back a couple of moves. If black plays on this side, then black would be able to get out in that direction, it might seem. But white can actually cover it. Oh, Marion, thank you very much. Thank you for the present. And because white has these forcing moves against black here, black cannot really cut those stones off. So white could still surround black. And similarly, if black plays, this one would be, it's sort of questionable because of the weakness here. Right, people are talking about how to improve. Just don't try too hard to learn a lot from one game. Like, my policy is that if you learn one thing from each game you play, and just make sure you concentrate on that one thing. Like if you go through the entire game and you try to find a mistake here and a mistake there, then you lose your focus and you're likely to forget everything. But if you just choose one part of the game where you think maybe you made your worst mistake, if you use a computer to analyze the game, maybe you could choose the one move that lost you the most points according to the computer. Because computers give you a score nowadays, so they can tell you which is the worst move as far as the computer is concerned. You can focus on just that one move. And if you completely understand what happened there in that mistake you made, then that's something that you're going to remember. And I think that it's better than trying to learn about a number of mistakes or a number of things in one game. If you're willing to do a lot, I think the maximum you can study is maybe three mistakes in a game. But it's a lot easier just to focus on one single mistake and understand exactly what happened there, and then you're not going to make that mistake the next time. And that's a surefire way of improving, I think. Or you can figure out what your weak point is and study that. So like if you have trouble reading, then just go to my channel. I put a channel link up I've pinned it at the top of the chat, I think. I have life and death videos that you can look at. So back to the game, white plays here. And the beauty of this move is that with this move alone, white has completed the connection here. Already that white group there is looking pretty strong. Also, white is setting up this move. In fact, black answers that by playing, after this exchange, black immediately played here. So this move is stopping white from playing b11, and also preparing to make 2 eyes. So that's how that worked. If black had played on the outside, white would have been able to scoop away black's eye space with this move. And since connecting at c12 is too painful, black's probably going to be doing stuff like this. This is a variation I got with Katago. And it's still good for white. Just white has this strong group on the side here. This is 100% alive. So this is a living group. This is getting to be fairly strong. With the forcing move at this point, it's already sort of connected up to white on the top side. And black's group in the center here, it's not alive yet. So this is an easy fight for white. This is working well. And black has only 1 eye. So black had to work to get that 1 eye, but only has 1. So black answers here. This makes sense. And white encloses the black group. You can see how everything is working and kind of cooperating with each other. All the white stones, and white is starting to dominate the center of the board. So this is although it's a game before you might have noticed in the early parts of the game, I was talking about old-fashioned joseis that they were playing. The opening theory was still a bit old-fashioned. And they improved the opening theory a great deal in the following centuries. So like even if we get to the 1600s, opening theory is already changing a lot. They made huge leaps forward in opening theory. But they hadn't done that yet at this time. It was kind of the dawn of the golden era of Go in Japan, because very shortly after this, they will be sponsored by the country. They will be sponsored by the government so that they can focus on Go 100% of their time. And we start to see, and it was a very prestigious profession, so we start to see some geniuses coming up. Very gifted Go players, a whole community of strong Go players. And so there was great progress made after this. So what I was trying to say is they have the tactical abilities and reading strength and stuff like that already. And they didn't have the same openings, maybe. But it goes already a very high level here of these people. Honinbo Sansa was sort of, you could call him the founder of the golden era. The whole school system is something that he set up with the help of the Tokugawa shogunate, which came to power in a couple of decades, I think. After the country came to a full peace, when it finally became peaceful, the Tokugawa shogunate started for what they called Iemoto, which was a kind of a family bonded school, but they weren't necessarily blood relations, but they were in the form of a family that controlled these schools. There were four go schools, and the Honinbo was the first one. Very shortly after they formed this whole system, Hayashi was also one of the 4 schools, and the player with black hair, Hayashi Rigen, is supposed to be the founder of the Hayashi school. So there is some question here with conflicting Go records and his name not always being fully shown, but he was the arch rival, you might say, of Honinbo Sansa, and they were studying together. When they had these events where they were showing Go players playing, quite often it was Hayashi Rigen who was playing against Honinbo Sansa. He wasn't Hayashi Rigen yet because he was still just a monk in the temple, but he did become the founder of the Hayashi school. So I believe that I have the player right. And the reason I have a date on this game is 1582. This was the night of the coup of Honno-ji. And so it was supposed to be being played on that night in the evening as a demonstration game. So black has lived here. White plays this forcing sequence to reinforce the wall on the outside. And black has been forced to live with just, well, 3 points of territory. It's what they call a 2-point life, but it's actually 3 points in this case. It's a bit painful. And white gets to surround the center now. So this whole sequence, like this is move number 78. The whole sequence from white e10 is, for white, it was just about perfect. So let's see if I can find that. Oh, even before that. So yeah, the whole sequence here, including this squeeze actually, but most importantly from this move on. So it's about a 20 move sequence that white played here, which created this thickness in almost what I would call a perfect sequence for white. So that's why I'm saying the level of play tactically it's so high here. There's no mistakes in this whole fight for white. And black started with a difficult shape. I'd say the one mistake was black's move down on the second line here, where I think black should have played up on the 4th line to get more height and stop white from doing that. But white handled it so well here. This is impressive. Okay, so I jumped ahead a little bit. Okay. So black extends here. Now this is a reasonable move. It is sort of looking at an invasion point here. And it's settling the black group here. So it makes sense. And white played here. So finally white starts this. So white starts this attack, which is still, it involves the ladder, which favors white. And white is going to try to build a big center. starting with this move. So for instance, if black plays here, black did play here. If black plays the cut underneath, then white will start building the center. So this is the move that I would probably not have chosen this move. This is the move that Katago plays. It's a bit tight, which probably demonstrates that Katago thinks white has a lead already. It works with that. White's going to give up some points on the side and just concentrate on surrounding the center. And this is going to be good enough for white. So at this point, white seems to have a slight advantage. Okay. So, actually it's interesting to see that the move suggested by Katago, I believe it was this one, where white doesn't even try to cut those two stones off and simply surrounds the center from the start. So it would be something like this. So that was a neat move also, but he played this active move in the game. And white has the idea that in this variation, which is the game variation, he's going to be able to kill the corner. So it's this great plan. Okay, why not cut it 2 instead? So this is, the question is about this move, right? So this is what the game move was. But of course black cannot play here because of the ladder. So black curls around. If white extends now, then black's going to capture the 3 stones. So usually allowing black to capture a stone towards the center of the board like this, usually it's not so good. And again, usually you would expect white to play here, but white actually extends here. With this move, white actually has a plan to kill the corner. It's going to die pretty much unconditionally. And it's sort of complicated. It gets complicated fairly soon. Yes. We'll see that happen. So this is actually where I would usually want to play here. This move is actually going to be better at killing the corner. And black plays here. And white just allowed black to close white in here, because white can kill the corner with this move. And so this is the Tesuji here. And this might be the first game in which it was played. This is common knowledge nowadays. It's sort of a variant of the carpenter's square, but when, for instance, if white had played here and black had played here, then we would have had the normal carpenter square shape. But when the sides open like this, and white is solid on both sides, white can play this move and jump. So this is a way to kill this shape. Just to go through some variations. If black wedges here, white can just connect underneath. If black plays here, this is a shape where white is going to win because it's an eye against no eye. So black doesn't have an eye, white has an eye, and black cannot win the race to capture. So it's pretty much dead. Like in some cases, black can get, if black's curling around here is forcing, black can get a ko. So sometimes black can get a ko like this. But it's one is not necessarily going to be answered by 2, and sometimes it just doesn't work well for black. So back, there's some variations to that. In the game, black played here and white played here. Now in this shape, even if black manages to kill these stones, it's going to be a dead shape in the corner. So like if black somehow managed to kill the stones, black actually needs a lot of moves. But if black manages to take them, it would still be a dead shape. So it's pretty hopeless there when white plays the key point at the S19 point. And if we look at the other side, white has a lot of liberties on the side. So if black starts filling liberties and we get into this, white's going to actually win by 2 moves. So white can play away once. And white still wins. White pushes from behind. So that's easy win for white. So it looks like black's pretty dead there. There's actually a kind of a hidden ko. So I'll show that one to you later. Black starts by attacking the corner here. And so we have another carpenter square in the lower right corner. And of course, white could live. White could have lived very easily by just playing here. That would have made a living shape. But you know, he's a top pro. He wants to do something better. So what he did was he played this, and with this exchange, he's establishing the forcing move at this point, which this is relevant when we get into that carpenter square shape. If white doesn't have this forcing move at the mark point, that's Q4, then sometimes it's going to die. So without that being a forcing move, it's going to die. When it is a forcing move, it's going to be the standard carpenter square, which is a ko. So white's decided that surrounding the center is going to be more important than protecting this corner. And it's right, the center is pretty big. So black plays here. This is an interesting move. It's actually a pretty sharp move. If black plays this way, then there's various problems with that. First of all, white has some extra liberties here. So white's going to play away again, and it's going to be really difficult for black to kill this corner. Another problem is that in some of the variations where black tries to kill it, it's relevant whether this move is going to be forcing or not. If black plays here and white plays here, black has to answer that because white's threatening to make a knight here. So black would answer it like that. Having a hane at 6, it actually makes it easier for white to live. So this would be a distant ko. Okay, whether P18 is always answered at white 018, it sort of depends. So that's going to be, I'm going to talk about that later. Okay, back to the game. Let's see. So white extended that far and then played here. So with this move, black is sort of trying to fill liberties. And if white connects here, and then, so we have white doesn't really want to play that, but just to clarify, I'll put that on the board. And then black plays here. Now this is not forcing anymore because black can play underneath. So this exchange of this for 1, not only is it filling one of white's liberties, it's taking away that forcing move at 7. So there's some meaning to that. It's a meaningful move, and white extends. And so white still has this forcing move. It's still a problem there. So white plays away again. So white handled that really well. And so we come to the end suddenly because the game record is not complete, but they say that it ended up being a triple ko. So I'm going to try to explain how there's actually a couple of kos sort of hidden in this game position. And I'll start with a discussion about the carpenter square. So for those of you who there's some players who don't like kos. And if you have an aversion to kos, you don't have to listen too closely. But let's talk about the carpenter square. Usually you don't have these extra stones. The standard shape is just this sort of right angle here. So it's that right angle surrounded by the opponent's stones. And so let's start by saying that what if black has filled all the outside liberties and has solid positions on both sides? So in this case, white would have no forcing moves on the first line or anything. And all of white's liberties on the outside are filled. Black can still play, in that case, there's a number of ways for black to get a ko, but this playing this move at S2 is still the standard way to go about it. So what happens in this corner is that in order to get a direct ko, black can play here. And if white plays here, this is actually going to be bad for white because black can get a dead shape inside the white group. So you can see how this stone at 6, if it was forcing, it would be a different story because black wouldn't be able to do that. So when black plays this move, white has to be careful not to play here. White has to actually play here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there we go. White has to play here. And white's going to get a ko now. Because if black plays underneath, white can make a ko here. If black tries to avoid the ko, this is going to turn into a seki. So this is actually alive with a seki. So those are the two basic shapes that you have to know. You have to know the hane here. Quite often everything is filled like this. So quite often all the outside liberties are filled. And you just have this basic carpenter square shape inside. And what you do for black then is you play the 2-2 point. If white knows to play the attachment there, it's going to turn into this variation. Like, I could talk about this for several hours. There's so many variations to this. But you have to know that if black plays this way, it's going to turn into a seki, which is not ideal for black. But if black plays this way, black can get a ko. And of course, if white plays here, this one is going to die. So this is the one that white has to avoid. It's not a seki anymore. The 5 was taking the key point. In the seki variation, it was because white got that point that it was a seki. So now let's look back at the game. Where white has not only an outside liberty, white has a forcing move at p1. So if black tries the same thing here, then at this point, white can play an Atari on the 2 stones and capture these, which is obviously, it's going to be a collapse for black. So, let's see, where am I? So black cannot do that, and black's correct move is to play here and here. So let's just leave it at this variation, where it amounts to this shape, which is the 10,000-year ko. And in this case, I'm going to have trouble creating a triple ko, because this is a step ko, and the upper right corner, there's some potential to get a ko. Let's just leave this position for the time being, and let's get back to the game. This is what the game was, with the ending position of the game. And I'm going to talk about this corner here, which there is a kind of a hidden ko there. So if black just goes after the corner here, I showed you that white can win the race. There's no ko attached to that. So what black would like to try to do is black wants to curl around here. And if white answers that, then black can play here. And white has to answer now. So black can play a hane here. So this can potentially be a problem. Because if white plays on this side, black can make a ko. So this is a ko that if black wins every time, so white will take it obviously, but if black forces white to protect there, black still cannot win against the corner. Black cannot win against the corner because white has an either. So this doesn't help black's race to capture against the corner, but it is going to change things when black goes after white's group on the side. So in this case, we get to this position where it's a step ko. It's an approach move ko, where if black plays, black still has to fight the ko at 5, but if black plays a move here, then it's going to be a direct ko to capture the whole corner. So black has a one-step approach move ko there, and has some kind of an approach move ko in the lower right corner. And just those 2 kos alone would not make a triple ko. We only have 2 kos so far. So I'll show you a variation in the lower right corner. I'll show you a variation in the lower right corner, which actually does involve a ko. So if black plays, let's just have white play some move. If black plays here and then plays one hane before playing here, sometimes we can get into a shape like this, where black has to fight this ko and will eventually fill some liberties. And at this point, we can get a double ko in that corner. So a double ko-like position where if black plays here, it's going to be a direct ko. So this would be a direct ko like this. But if black plays here, then let's just make it fill one more dame. Fill one more dame, and then it's going to be perfect. So let's fill one more dame. And then if black plays here, it's still going to be a ko. But if black plays here, white cannot connect anymore. So it turns into this double ko, in which case we can have a triple ko, which goes on forever. So maybe they did have some kind of a triple ko in a combination of that. It's the best I can do. To be frank, if white gets this much in the center, capturing this corner is not going to be good enough. So maybe that's not going to be good enough to win the game anyway for black. But my only guess, if this is actually, there is some discussion as to whether this is actually the game that turned into a triple ko. Maybe they played a different game that made a triple ko. It is recorded that they got a triple ko. So that's the best I can do to create a triple ko out of that situation. It's not really working 100%, but it's close. And just to talk about this move here, which I said became forcing. Now, if white has a very strong position here, let's just put some white stones. Just one stone here suffices. If white has a stone there, then white can answer here in the corner. There's no ko happening, and it's just going to be a win for white. So that would be a win for white. But in the game situation, let's get rid of those two stones now. In a game situation, sometimes, for instance, black can start. We can imagine. We can imagine a board position where black has played some endgame moves against white in the center, and gets to a position like this, in which case this would be forcing, because now white cannot cover here. This would be a collapse for white. And if black gets some extra liberties here, for instance in a shape like this, this is going to change the result of this race to capture. So in this case, it looks like black's going to win. And white has no way to fill liberty at this point. So black's going to win by one move. So that's an example of how curling around at 7 in this diagram, depending on how they play the end game, sometimes it's going to be forcing. And that means that if white has to answer it, then black can play this sequence to make a ko out of it. So black can make a ko out of it. This is another variation of that ko, which is the same kind of result. It's going to be a step ko, where if black fills a liberty here at this point, let's put a black stone. Black plays one more move here, it's going to be a direct ko. If black can win the ko at 0-19 and then play another move here, then what black wins. So there's this ko that could happen in the upper right corner and this ko that could happen in the lower right corner. Maybe they somehow managed to make it into a triple ko, but yes. So there's these two ko's. One of the reasons it got a bit complicated is that I sort of have to work hard to actually make it work and become a triple ko. I'm trying to get to the triple ko. It's difficult for me starting from this board position. Part of it is the fact that white does seem to have a fairly substantial lead in this board position. So in some cases, this lower right corner that I've circled, depending on how they finish the game, in some cases it would be okay for white to sacrifice that. So maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. It's possible that they played more than one game, and one of the other games was the triple ko game. But the story is that on the night of this game, it was, historically, it was the 30th of June on 1582. Oda Nobunaga's general, one of his generals, called Akechi Mitsuhide, he betrayed Oda Nobunaga and attacked the Honno-ji temple. And so just about every Japanese probably knows this story because it's a famous story in Japanese history. And it is a turning point in Japanese history. when after about 100 years of fighting, they were on the verge of unifying the country. And it took a couple more decades to completely settle down, but they did eventually start the Tokugawa shogunate, which lasted for about 300 years. So that's the story. I did my best to show how maybe it could turn into a triple ko. It does take a lot of work, so maybe the players just had some fun towards the end of the game. Because there was an audience, it was part of a kind of a party. So I'm coming to an end here. Let's just show you the ending position for the game again. It ended after white played here. And this is the sort of the official version of the game. This is the most reliable record that I have. So that's it for this game. I would like to continue to introduce you to some historical Go players. So the two players in this game, Honinbo Sansa, he was like the founder of the whole system. They were the founder. Honinbo Sansa was the founder of the whole system that made the professional system in the Edo era. So he was the teacher of these three warlords who eventually unified Japan. He was a teacher for all three of them. So he was a teacher of Oda Nobunaga, and he went on to teach Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Ieyasu, Tokugawa Ieyasu also. And so they appointed him as the leader of the Go organization when they started making Go schools. And Hayashi Rigen was probably the second strongest player at the time of this game, and he became the founder of the Hayashi school later in his life. So two giants of the Go scene, and back 400, 500 years. So I'll finish here. Thank you all for watching to the end. I probably will continue with some more historical game lives in the future when I don't have any international tournaments to talk about. So thank you all. Sign up to my channel, and I'll be back. So I'll see you again. Thank you.